In the same months that the Chattanooga Campaign was occurring in the US Civil War, an arguably more brutal, albeit smaller, conflict was raging in the northwest frontier of British India. This was a clash conducted in limited visibility, swirling fog and hand-to-hand, with both sides fighting over two key hills. Neither side expected nor gave quarter. This was Umbeyla Pass, or as the locals later came to know it as, the place of slaughter. Today, we follow the life, times and campaigns of a participant of this part of forgotten history, Lance Corporal Henry Rugg, from the 7th Foot of Fusiliers. Furthermore, we visit the Tower of London, the modern home of the regiment's museum. From his papers, Henry lived on Tangier Way in Taunton, the southwest of England. The 7th Fusiliers were a City of London-based regiment, but like all regiments of the British Army at that time, took recruits from across the country. So Henry, not being from London, was not uncommon. Just looking at the origins of other soldiers from the regiment, we see all kinds of other towns and counties across England, such as Salford, Manchester, Kent, Blackburn and Shoreditch in London. Taunton was a market town in Somerset, and in medieval times became wealthy through the sale of wool cloth. In 1839, the Grand Western Canal reached Taunton and the railway arrived in 1842, making it a centre in the Victorian era for brewing, iron foundry and shirt collars. We don't know when Henry joined the army, but likely after the Crimean War, which ended in 1856, as it appears he was only entitled to one medal for the Umbeyla Campaign. The 1st Battalion, 7th Foot, sailed for India in the summer of 1857. During 1858, the battalion was based in Lahore. It appears the 7th missed out on the majority of the action of the Indian Rebellion or Mutiny and settled down to garrison duty. In February 1859, the 1st Battalion were inspected by the Viceroy of India, Lord Canning. In April, the battalion moved north to Jhelum, but there was insufficient accommodation and part of the unit was moved again to Rawalpindi. By the end of November 1859, the whole battalion had marched further northwest on the Grand Trunk Road and was now stationed in Peshawar. The whole of 1860 and 1861 was spent in the Peshawar-Nowshera Valley on the northwest frontier. Those two towns were major cantonments or stations for the British Army. After 2 years in the region and acclimatising, the battalion moved back to the southeast into the Punjab to the city of Firozpur, which was to be its base during 1862 and 1863. It was while the 7th Foot was based in Firozpur that the Umbeyla conflict erupted. Pathan, or as they're modernly known, Pashtun tribesmen in Sitana, about 30 miles north of Peshawar, had harboured Indian mutineers from the Indian Rebellion of 1857-1858, who were still actively resisting British rule. These were known to the British as Hindustani fanatics. The rebels had declared perpetual war against the British and surrounding infidels. Concentrating their forces in the vicinity of the village of Malka, these groups conducted continuous raids into British territory. The government finally decided to take punitive action and a large force invaded the area. British forces numbered around 5,000 men, with prominent units including the Corps of Guides, Probyn's Horse, 2 Gurkha regiments, and the Bengal Fusiliers. Hearing about this, the Akhund of Swat, a legendary local leader and prominent religious saint, united many Pathan clans and tribesmen against the British. Here's a bit of background on the Akhund of Swat, and again, apologies for any mispronunciations. Akhund Abdul Ghaffar, also known as Seydou Baba and the Akhund of Swat, was a prominent religious saint, scholar and founder of the state of Swat. Ghaffar was born into a humble household in Upper Swat and spent his early years tending sheep and cattle, but at the age of 18 decided to become a holy man and live his life out as an ascetic. Over time, he gained a considerable following and was respected as a wise religious leader. Referred to by the British as the Border Pope, Ghaffar fought the Sikhs in the 1830s. The city of Seydou Sharif, which serves as the administrative capital of Swat district in modern-day Pakistan, is named after him. Due to his pious nature, many believed that Ghaffar had supernatural powers. One anecdote states that a sum of money for a day's expenses would magically appear under Ghaffar's prayer mat every day. bringing his followers from the nearby Swat Valley to swell resistance numbers. Combined in all, up to 25,000 tribesmen and rebels faced the British, determined to prevent the British from entering their territory and taking Malka. In order to reach their stronghold, the British Indian Army had to pass through the Ambela Pass. The Ambela Pass, known to the British as Umbeyla, guards the mountainous region of Buner, in the modern Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province of Pakistan. The pass itself is strewn with large boulders, craggy ravines and steep hillsides. Parts of it are also covered with thick pine wood. The heights on either side of the pass are rugged and covered in thick and sometimes impenetrable scrub. This is the pass today. Even though some development and modern road construction has affected the terrain, the topography still shows why it was a choke point and an area of tactical importance. The campaign began on 18th of October with the 1st Peshawar column, known as the Yusufzai Field Force, reaching the Ambela Pass on the 20th of October after struggling on rough terrain, and the rear of the column took another 2 days to reach the base. Seeing the British arrive, a local Pathan tribe that was initially neutral and lived in the pass, the Brunewal, were not told of the expedition until the last minute. Suspicious of the British, they joined the other rebel groups. On 22nd of October, a reconnaissance was attacked by some Brunewal tribesmen. As a result, General Chamberlain, in charge of the expedition, proceeded to fortify his position in the pass on 2 rocky outcrops. These strategic outcrops were named Eagle's Nest and Crag Picket. However, both Eagle's Nest and Crag Picket could only hold small numbers of men. The Eagle's Nest could only accommodate 110 men, so 120 more were placed under the shelter of some rocks at its base, and the remainder of the troops, told off for the defence of the left picket, were drawn up about a rocky knoll 400 feet west of the Eagle's Nest. This failure to be able to consolidate a strong position at these 2 key objectives would cause major issues for the British as the Pathans began a series of assaults against the positions. On 30th of October, Crag Picket was the scene of fierce hand-to-hand fighting and heavy casualties that saw 2 Victoria Crosses awarded. Winter arrived early and the dense fog and mist hindered visibility. Artillery or fire support found it difficult to support the troops. In this murky weather, the Pathans were in their element, fighting in the concealed terrain at close quarters, sneaking up to British lines ready to strike with their sharpened Khyber knives. Before each attack, the Pathans would traditionally psych themselves up by using tom-tom drums. Just imagine being a British or Indian soldier, hearing the rhythmic drum beats, staring into the fog and anticipating the next onslaught. Seeing silhouettes edging closer and closer towards you through the mist, it must have been terrifying. Crag Picket fell to the Pathans 3 times, no less, in the next 4 weeks, but was retaken by British forces on each occasion. I'm quoting from 41 Years in India, written by Field Marshal Lord Roberts, his memoirs, which are an excellent first-hand account and source of the Umbeyla Campaign. Some 2,000 of the enemy, the Brunewals, occupied a breastwork on the crest of the spur of Guru Mountain near Eagle's Nest, and about noon on the 26th they moved down, and with loud shouts attacked the Eagle's Nest. Their matchlock men posted themselves to the greatest advantage in a wood, and opened up a galling fire on our positions, while their swordsmen made a determined advance. The nature of the ground prevented our guns from being brought to bear against the assailants, and they were thus able to get the open space in front of the picket and plant their standards close under its parapet. On the 20th of November, Chamberlain was seriously wounded whilst attempting to take Crag Picket yet again. A temporary pause occurred in the fighting as the British took stock and assessed the situation, communicating with Army HQ in Shimla for direction. Although there was an initial decision to withdraw, it was eventually agreed on that in light of the recent Indian rebellion and mutiny, any retreat would seriously impact the prestige of the British in India and could encourage other groups to rebel. Therefore, the injured Chamberlain was replaced with the dynamic Major General John Garvock on the 6th of December. The 1st Battalion 7th Foot of Fusiliers were part of the reinforcements sent to Umbeyla when it became clear that the campaign was being bogged down. All in all, 10,000 British and Indian troops were now involved in the fighting. On the 5th of November 1863, most of the 7th Foot began to march northwest to the Peshawar region. It joined the other forces at the Umbeyla Pass on the 5th of December. The regiment contained many veterans of the Crimea, so were by no means a green and untested outfit. Here is a snapshot of the fighting I read from Lord Roberts' 41 Years in India. Natural hillmen, the Gurkha troops were ideal for carrying out outpost duty and skirmishing in the rocky terrain, which the British and Sikh troops had difficulty dealing with, frequently exposing themselves to snipers. The Pathans and Gurkhas were quite at home at such work, and not only able to take care of themselves, but when stalked by the enemy, were equal to a counterstalk, often most successful. The enemy used to joke with Brownlow's and Key's men on these occasions, saying, "We don't want you. Where are the Lal Pagriwallahs, i.e. the Sikhs, or the Goralog, the Europeans? They are better shikar, or sport." The tribesmen soon discovered that the Sikhs and Europeans, though full of fight, were very helpless on the hillside, and could not keep their heads under cover. Interestingly, much of the fierce fighting at Eagle's Nest occurred between British forces and fighters from the old 55th Native Infantry, a regiment that had mutinied during the Indian Rebellion of 1857. Prior to the campaign, many local Pathans were recruited into British ranks, especially into units such as the Corps of Guides, so that some of the Pathan soldiers ending up fighting their kinsmen, and in one case, a Pathan sepoy reportedly witnessed the body of his own father among the enemy dead. At this point, with the fighting so intense and difficult, a mutual respect began to occur between the two groups. For 3 weeks, almost daily attacks were made on our position. The enemy fought magnificently, some of them being killed inside our batteries. Arriving in early December, the 7th Foot finally helped tip the balance. The 7th were involved in a decisive battle on the 15th of December, and a prominent position known as Conical Hill, which protected the approach, was taken after yet another desperate fight, and the Pathans retreated. On the final advance, Roberts makes a mention of the 7th Foot. The advance was continued to within about 800 yards of the pass, when Turner, observing a large body of men threatening his left flank, immediately sent 2 companies of the Royal Fusiliers in that direction. Just at that moment, a band of Ghazis furiously attacked the left flank, which was at a disadvantage, having got into broken ground covered with low jungle. In a few seconds, 5 of the pioneer British officers were on the ground, 1 killed and 4 wounded. Numbers of the men were knocked over, and the rest, staggered by the suddenness of the onslaught, fell back. On their reserve, where they found needed support, were the Fusiliers, who stood their ground like a rock. The regiment then went on to burn the nearby village of Lalu, which was reported to be a staging area for the rebels. The British then marched through the pass and torched the village of Malka before withdrawing. At that point, the campaign was over. In summary, a campaign that had been planned for 2 or 3 weeks had taken 3 months to finish and involved around 10,000 men. Over 900 casualties were reported on the British side, with the expedition in total suffering 238 dead and 670 wounded. Rebel numbers were unknown, but estimated in the thousands. This was some of the worst and most brutal fighting with the Pathans on the frontier, and would not be equalled again for another 35 years during a tribal uprising when the British lost control of the Khyber Pass. But that's a story for another day. The clasp Umbeyla was added to the IGS Service Medal in recognition of this fight. Although the Pathans and British had fought in the 1850s, after the British had taken over this part of the country from the Sikh Empire, it's really where Umbeyla, in my opinion, the Pathans' fearsome reputation is sealed for the British. Going forward, operating in this region, British forces would have a deep and long-lasting respect for the Pathan as a feared opponent. Henry and his regiment finally returned to Portsmouth in England in April 1871, the regiment having spent 14 years in India. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.